American universities were interested in the medical uses of meditation as early as the 1920s. That's when American doctors started going to India to study the use of meditation in a hospital. Over the next 40 years, American doctors went to India to study yogis, and yogis made dramatic demonstrations of meditation for Indian and Western doctors to see. So at Lonvala, at the remarkable hospital there, the research in the medical uses of meditation went on from the 1920s through the 1930s, and then also in India, starting in 1931, there was a most remarkable series of demonstrations by yogis intending to turn upside down the sense of vital functions that we had in the West, like the very nature of breathing and the very nature of the beating of the heart. And in each of these cases, the yogi was buried underground, which meant no air. Right away, that challenged any Western understanding that there could be survival without breathing. So the first yogi was buried in a box just big enough for him to sit in yogic posture, and just clearing the top of his head and just enough space for his body to sit in upright. And he was buried about 5 feet underground. It was the box was covered over with earth, sealing it off from the atmosphere. Really nothing much in the way of air to breathe except a little bit in the box, which the average person would breathe up within 10 minutes or less, and the brain would start to become impaired and die, according to Western understanding. But after a burial of 1 day, the yogi came out really fit, did some handstands. Somehow he was able to survive without breathing. In 1932 and 1933, there were 2 other demonstrations, one where a yogi was buried similarly in a very small box underground, covered over thoroughly, and was able to do it for 2 days with apparently no breathing, and again come out healthy. Then a yogi in 1934 buried himself had himself buried in the small box underground for 4 days. And this time they had some instrumentation on him to try to follow, as far as they could, the effects of what he was doing. But essentially he survived with no air for 4 days underground. And then in 1938 came the most remarkable demonstration of the burial of the yogis. This particular yogi had apparently very good PR and had it set up so he drew a tremendous amount of international attention. And at the site where he was going to be buried for 7 days, there was a medical team from India, there were some observers from American universities, and 10,000 Indian people, the whole families, camped out all around the area, said the newspapers, because they thought this was a remarkable spiritual event. And they were camped out for the entire 7 days of the demonstration. So, as in the previous cases, a very small box, just big enough for the yogi to sit in, and just to the top of his head, and then the box was put 7 feet under the ground. He went down and sat in it in yogic posture. The box was closed, some metal plate was put over the top, and then it was totally covered in and packed in with earth. And with the yogi had on his chest, carefully taped to him, an electronic stethoscope, 1938, the state-of-the-art technology, You could pretty clearly hear the boom, 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 boom. And then he had two other leads on him to measure the respiration. There was apparently not going to be any respiration, but that was so remarkable they wanted to measure the non-respiration, if that was to be the case. And so the yogi went down, sat in the box, was buried, and the agreement was he was supposed to have an internal clock and know that exactly the start period was at noon on the first day. At noon he was completely buried, and his heart for after the burial, until they completed the packing in of the earth and everything, his heart was beating at 60 beats a minute, which is pretty much normal, calm breathing. And then at noon, as they had the whole thing sealed in, the heartbeat stopped, or at least there was no sign of heartbeat on the recording systems, and there was no sign of respiration, and everything was still and quiet. And the 10,000 Indian people gathered around had great confidence. Of course, there had been previous demonstrations, none as dramatic as 7 days. And so the quiet ensued, and with the melodic chanting from the Indians all surrounding the area, and the spiritual sense over the whole thing, Western press, international press there, very quiet, waiting day after day. And then came the seventh day. And as it was approaching noon, about 30 minutes before noon, his heartbeat came back on again, beating at 60 beats a minute, nice and calm, nice and steady, utterly remarkable. Still no sign of respiration. And so they exhumed him. They brought him out. He was in good shape, smiling, and what a remarkable demonstration for the world. And normally we would think that when the heart stops beating and when we stop breathing, those are generally called the time of death. But here the yogi had been able to do something with his heartbeat, make it so subtle, and do something other than breathing, which was just turned our Western sense of what was possible to do with the human body upside down. I'm Robert Bruce Newman. For more information about my work and my books, please visit medigrace.org and calmbirth.org.